A lot of people are really enjoying the new Fallout TV series. It gives this beloved game franchise a position in place in major television that it's never had before, but it is also changing perhaps some really coveted storylines and characters that belong to some of the best iterations in the series. And today I wanted to go through exactly what this television show is doing to Fallout New Vegas, to the NCR, and to our beloved Mr. House.
With all that money pouring in, give me 20 years and I'll reignite the high technology development sectors. 50 years and I'll have people in orbit. 100 years and my colony ships will be heading for the stars to search for planets unpolluted by the wrath and folly of a bygone generation.
Let's start with Mr. House and Fallout New Vegas. We actually get to see House as a young man, as the CEO of Robco International, during a business meeting between Vault-Tec and several other very prominent brand leaders that you may recognize from the Fallout series. He chides the CEO of Big Mountain and says that he couldn't even earn money running a casino, which is a little bit of an Easter egg for those that know for the DLC in Fallout New Vegas of Dead Money. After that, he argues with the idea that Vault-Tec is having, that they should essentially end the world so that they can test out these vaults, and he is the one dissenting voice, admittedly not loudly or for any virtuous reason, simply because, as those that have played Fallout New Vegas know, he has different plans. As for Vegas itself, we only get a glimpse of it as the main antagonist, Hank, is walking with a suit of power armor. He steps beside the skull of a Deathclaw, probably around Quarry Junction, and the camera pans up and we see Vegas. It looks generally devoid of life, pretty broken down, but the Lucky 38 Tower is still on display with the idea that he is going there, and so will our two other titular characters, Cooper the Ghoul and Lucy. After that, it goes immediately into a very stylized version of the credits that we've seen at the end of every single one of these episodes, and we see a very destroyed New Vegas with the Tops Casino, the Lucky 38, destroyed NCR vertibirds, barbed wire, and not a single living soul, before panning to the iconic gate and sign with some dead Securitrons underneath. The one thing you will note is that the Lucky 38 in the main tower is unscathed. So clearly, if there is a season 2, which it looks like there's going to be, the characters are going to New Vegas. Based on the dialogue that was said by Cooper the Ghoul, it does seem like they're looking for the prime mover behind the cycle of violence. You know, the idea that war never changes. He's looking for the person that benefits from that and is ensuring that it doesn't change. It seems to be setting up that perhaps Mr. House is the person that is behind these moves, that he is the one that is still alive in his semi-awake, semi-robotic form that we all know and remember from Fallout New Vegas, and that he was the one that affected this nuclear disaster that ended the world. This does not tie in remotely to the events of Fallout New Vegas or the established lore, even if you factor in when these different games take place in relation to the TV show. We are looking at just under a 20-year difference between the events of Fallout New Vegas and the TV show. In that time, to assume that all of Vegas is nearly destroyed, or at least not in the state of recovery as it would be based on the events of New Vegas if you do complete the game, I think is pretty upsetting. You know, I think they're establishing this area not as a jewel in the wasteland, as it was called by Mr. House, but another broken down area with a robotic overlord that we saw in this series time and time again. Those working at Bethesda and those that have connections to the TV show did confirm that they're not actively retconning all of Fallout New Vegas, but it would be difficult to see how that is not the case based on the representations that we've seen of New Vegas so far. It's just been glimpses, and I think you can admit that the credit scenes are often very over-stylized, so it would be odd if that was exactly what New Vegas would look like in the second season. But the one thing we have not seen in any of these depictions is a city that's thriving, is a casino town, is a real Vegas. That is gone from what we've seen, and based on the fact that the antagonist is going here, that our protagonists are chasing him to try to find the prime movers behind all of this cycle of violence, and that we've already established Mr. House as a character, I do think, unfortunately, they are twisting and turning this rather interesting character in the series as a rather pragmatic but ruthless, robotic, semi-robotic man into just an archetypical villain that has, again, trying to reestablish this dying Vegas. I'm not for it. Everything that we've seen is suggesting that, but that is not to say that they couldn't make some very big changes and actually show Vegas as something that is more alive, is more vibrant, and reflecting at least one of the canon endings from Fallout New Vegas. Why I don't think they're going to do that has to be how the television show treated basically any Fallout product that wasn't created directly by Bethesda. They almost actively nuked it. So let's just for a second talk a little bit about the NCR as we know it for those who really enjoy the Fallout universe.
Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
By the time of Fallout 2, the NCR was the largest post-war nation in the country. Collectively, over 700,000 people were considered to be citizens of the NCR. By the time that Fallout New Vegas rolls around, that number is estimated to be well over 1 million. It was a complex nation that had a complex set of laws that banned some very basic things like murder, theft, and even public drunkenness. This was all connected with a codified constitution and several senatorial representatives of each of the different states found within that republic. It was the future. It was the representation of new civilization, flawed as it would be, in this post-apocalyptic world. And in the Fallout TV show, that was all destroyed because of a marital dispute by a Vault-Tec employee who decided to nuke the capital. One of the pushing narratives in the Fallout TV series is what happened to the NCR. Two of the main characters end up in the crater that was Shady Sands, with one of them saying that it was nuked several years ago, that it was destroyed when the bombs fell when he was a kid. Shady Sands, as you might remember, which was featured in the earlier Fallouts, is the capital of the NCR, the largest nation post-war in America, that, as we said, was the most established and was so established that they were able to actually push imperialist campaigns of expansion into the Mojave and other regions. But in this storyline, it was destroyed, and as a result of that, the NCR as an identity, as a nation, has collapsed in some way or another. It's collapsed by the time that the Fallout TV show occurs, which is 2296. We see later exactly how this happened based on a bit of visual storytelling in one of the vaults where they're telling the history of the NCR. We see its formation written on a chalkboard, very important events in its timeline, and then eventually this image labeled as the fall of Shady Sands, pointing towards a nuke, and the date 2277. That means that Shady Sands would have fallen before the events of Fallout New Vegas. And anyone who is familiar with the game Fallout New Vegas knows that if something remotely close to that happened in the series, there is no way that the events of that game would have taken place. It is just not possible. Now, some people are splitting hairs and say that because it says the fall of Shady Sands and is then pointing to the nuke, that means it didn't happen exactly at that time, for which I say all of this is made up. So at some point you have to either listen to what is being said in visual storytelling as being true or not. But the idea that you're splitting hairs and saying, this isn't an accurate interpretation, I think is really, really silly. But let's even take that and push it to years later. Why wouldn't it be a date that was past 2281, the events of Fallout New Vegas? There's just no reason. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't correspond with the timeline that we've seen so far in the Fallout series. Now, that might not matter to you, but the byproduct of that, this idea that there was a destruction of the largest nation that was operating in this country, means that a different sort of story is being told, and I think that is the most upsetting thing. Fallout as a series is really two different things. It's divided between the games created by Interplay, Black Isle, and Obsidian, and the games created by Bethesda. They have two different design philosophies and just general meta-narratives. The former is about the management of the apocalypse with an absurdist take as groups of people come together and try to enact ideologies on each other, and you navigate them. The latter is a sci-fi 50s action adventure game that's made very well. The problem is that this TV show only tries to be that sci-fi adventure game. It never even comes close to accessing any of the things that made those other games great. It actually does the opposite and literally nukes it. There's some speculation that this could be some sort of direct or indirect action by Bethesda to quote unquote get rid of the game in the series that everyone loves that they didn't make. I think that's a little more conspiratorial. I think this is just the people that made this game spoke to the people that made one type of Fallout, not the other. So all of these moving parts don't work together. You can't have the Fallout TV show that people seem to like if the NCR is an established nation. It just would not work, and they wouldn't be able to tell that sort of story. For those of you questioning if this is a retcon or how it changes anything, there's also speculation exactly how much the TV show is canon. There's some argument even against the creators about that idea. If you do take what we have seen so far in the show as canon, then it does actively conflict with the timelines that have been introduced by the games. And even if you avoid that and don't care that Shady Sands is in the wrong place and many of these things are happening at the wrong time, the destruction of a nation that was supposed to represent a change in the wasteland that your character was supposed to navigate and address to pose some very interesting questions is a loss. And personally, I like the Fallout that was created that way. I'm not a big fan of the alternative that Bethesda has taken, and I'm really worried about what we will see in the second season in terms of what they will do to New Vegas and to Mr. House. I do think if they actively made House more of a foaming at the mouth villain that just basically requires the unity of all mankind so that our civilization can work, I think there'll be more of a backlash. What we've seen here are just whims and whispers of that. But there is, in my mind, without a doubt, proof that this television series did actively make choices that derail the established lore created in Fallout 1, Fallout 2, Fallout New Vegas, and the alternative non-Bethesda Fallout games. If that matters to you, that's okay, because frankly, it does matter to me. All this stuff is made up, and I am choosing to be upset at the made up stuff that I like what do you think and what do you fear will happen in season 2 with House and Vegas?